Episode 6, Winded City Countdown. I'm Scott Sterl, joined with Ben Russo and Matt Urich on President's Day. A day off for some of us, not for others. But hey, it's all good because it snowed yesterday, and you know, if you didn't have to take the day off, that's not a bad thing. Who wants to stay home and have a day off when the weather is craptacular, right, gentlemen? Ben Russo, you did not have it off today. We're jumping right in here. Ben, did you really feel bad that you had to go to work today?
No, because honestly, I'm at the point where I don't even know when these holidays come around. So I probably didn't even know it was President's Day until this morning when Matt asked if any of us were off for President's Day. So this kind of stuff doesn't bother me anymore.
Bothers Matt, though, who's living in his parents' basement, which, by the way, Matt, I got to tell you a story before you get started on this.
Okay.
I had lunch with my dad today, and he said I should take it down a notch. I'm making fun of you for living in your parents' basement. He was really concerned. He turns to me, dead serious. He just turns to me. He's in the middle of eating his chili, and he turns to me and he goes, "Scott, be serious. I think you need to take it down a notch from Matt." Take it down. He's living his parents' basement.
I love your dad. That's awesome.
So I just thought you'd enjoy that. And I turned to him, and he says that to me, and I look right at him, I go, "I'm using this on the podcast."
That's great. That is great.
So go ahead, Matt. Anyways.
Sorry, I was distracted by somebody rapping on the Grammys. I forgot what we were talking about. Anyways, yeah, bitter about having to work, but I'm bitter about working all the time, so whatever. That's all I got. What's that?
You're bitter about something every week. I mean, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, but mostly it's because I haven't eaten anything. That's normally why I'm bitter. But today
that's why you're fat.
Well, yeah, that too.
But that's why we're all fat, so it's okay. That's why we're Winded City. There it is.
Heyo.
Episode's in. We finally explained it to someone, I'm sure. All right. Well, before we get started, I'm going to start with some things that are really good, which are I got a shout out. We went international last week, gentlemen. We really did. It was a big moment for the show. I logged on one morning. I looked at the map, and there was a tab for World on Podbean where we host our podcast. And Finland, 2 downloads. Amazing. I couldn't believe it. So we're international, so go us.
Always been a big Finland guy myself. So
huge Finnish person over here. So, but no, I do think it's really awesome, and hopefully that person tunes in again because you got a little shout out.
Or 2 people.
Or 2, yeah.
Could be. So that's great. And then also a big milestone for us today. We hit 520 downloads. So we're averaging about 100 per episode, which to some people may seem like not a lot, but to us we can't really believe that many people are downloading. So if you are downloading, if you are subscribing, thank you. We appreciate it. Tell your friends. Share the post on Facebook. We're really, really, really happy with where we're at right now, and just hope to continue to grow and keep making you tune in, listen to our list, and hopefully spread the word, right? So go us. That gets me pumped because, unfortunately, we are in the downtime. The Super Bowl has ended. It is the mid-season of hockey and basketball. Spring training hasn't started yet. College basketball is still a couple weeks away from the tournament. So this is the downtime of sports. But we need something to boost us up. So this week, we're doing the 10 best plays in Chicago sports history. Plays/moments, kind of. We tried to stick it specifically to plays. But we got a couple that have that little bit of cross in there with moment. So good list, Ben. You put it together. Were you surprised at all as you put this week's list together?
No, I don't think so. I think there was other than one of yours, but whatever. I think
there's always a Scott moment.
Whatever.
I'm an outside the box thinker. You guys are just jealous, and
Yeah, sure. I think we had a lot similar in varying orders, which I thought was interesting. Like some of us had some higher than others, to the point where my number 9 was somebody's number 1 type thing, which was cool to see, just what we can remember. And I mean, the list came across and it was just, like I said, a lot of the same moments, but then there were moments where I go, oh God, didn't even think about putting that one on the list. So, yeah, and I don't think there was anything surprising that made it. I don't think there was anything surprising that didn't make it, I guess. But overall, yeah, pretty good list.
All right, well, let's get to it. I'll start it off with the honorable mention. So these were three that didn't make it onto the top 10. We had the Steve Kerr 1997 NBA Finals. He hits the game-winning shot, and then I like adding to that story. I love when Kerr is at the parade then.
Oh, that
and he
was
tells
so
the
good.
story about how he looked over to Michael and I'll pick you up this time, and I really love like that addition to this.
So you have to bail him out again.
Yeah,
He's
bail
like,
him out.
fine, I'll bail you out again, Michael.
We had a recent history, the Kyle Schwarber scoreboard bomb from this past October, which we were talking a bit about it off air before we started, and I said if the Cubs really do something this year, which just seems unbelievable that we can even talk about that at this point. If they really do something this year, that moment might get jumped up the list here as that moment that we all look back on and go, man, that was like the calm before the storm type of thing. So there was that. And then the third one is one that I hold near and dear to my heart because I was there for this one, and that was Kane's hat trick with the overtime winner in Game 5 against the LA Kings to send the Hawks on to their second Stanley Cup final in 4 years. 4 years, right? 3 years? 2010, 2013? 4 years.
Yeah, 4 years.
4 seasons, 2 cups. So there was our honorable mention. So any other honorable mentions that either of you wanted to bring up before we hit number 10?
No, not really, because I mean, for the most part, I think the rest of mine all made the list. So the Steve Kerr one, I didn't even think about. That one actually kind of made me mad that I didn't even think about that one, because that was kind of a cool moment. I agree with you, Scott, especially like the aftermath of it.
What happened after added to it itself, but I mean, it was still a great play. And
yeah.
For sure. So, all right, well, since we don't really have any other honorable mentions, let's get to the list. And I know this one's near and dear to Ben. Ben, one of your favorite pitchers of all time, Kerry Wood. And the play is the final pitch of his 20 strikeout game from 1998. Ben, you talked about it offline. What is it about that final pitch that you love?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, despite you have the natural thing, they have the pitcher game rating where that Kerry Wood game, despite a one hitter, it was still a shutout, is still the highest graded game of any, including all perfect games and everything like that. But it was really that final pitch that stood out to me. I mean, this was a guy who, off the top of my head, I don't remember how many pitches it was exactly, but he threw a lot of pitches, and it was his final pitch, and that slider that he threw started at Derek Bell's wrist and ended up 2 feet off the plate, and it was just a culmination of the entire game where he was basically unhittable. The only hit was this dribbler to third base that any other day could have possibly been called an error, and all of a sudden we're talking about a no-hitter instead. But it was just that one pitch, and again, we talked about this on a previous podcast where you have those moments where I don't need to see video to remember exactly what happened. I can just picture that ball releasing out of his hand and Derek Bell just basically doing like a half-swing type thing, basically trying to make contact and didn't come anywhere close. It's a game that I'll never forget. I was 13 years old when I watched it, but again, I think that's something that'll stick in my memory for a long, long time.
Matt, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm with Ben that it's one of those like iconic moments. I actually did not have this on my list only because I was sort of trying to make it as singular as possible instead of over a full moment, which it is because of a full moment, but it's also because that pitch itself was pretty amazing. I look back through, he threw 122 pitches that day.
Yeah.
He also balked. I did not know that.
Yeah, I saw that I went through the play-by-play today.
Yeah.
I think what's most amazing, 4 innings where he struck out the side.
That's
Struck out the
unbelievable.
side in the
I mean,
first,
let's not
fifth,
forget he was
seventh, and
20.
eighth.
He was 20 years old too, which just adds to it. I mean, gosh, he's like this is a topic for a different day, but he's like one of the ultimate what could have been type players.
Well,
You know what I mean?
Him and Pryor. I mean, you
I
know,
would even say Wood has I would say Wood has a stronger case than that, just because. Again, topic for a different day. I don't want to get off topic, but at the time he was just one of those like what if guys. So
I couldn't agree with you more, especially when I look at and I know this is off topic, that Mets team from this October, and everyone's like, oh, they got the arms to go, forever, and I'm just sitting here going, yeah, so did the Cubs. The Cubs did in '03. If anybody would have walked away saying it's a disappointment the Cubs didn't win a World Series with Pryor and Wood, because those two guys were so dominant, and that's why I look at that and I hear everybody, the Mets. It's like there's no guarantees, and Kerry Wood, as you said, Ben, for a different day that conversation could take place. But man, once upon a time, that guy, and on that day, whew, so
special. That's the best way to describe it.
For sure. So. All right, moving on, number 9. So this is the one that Ben was talking about that I put on my list. This was my number 1, which, again, you could agree or disagree with it, but this one just is burned into my brain forever. And I watched the replay again tonight, and because I took some notes to just kind of refresh and make sure I had everything here, and the play itself is just burned into my memory forever, where Pippen gets the ball on the block. I mean, the whole sequence leading up to it, where Jordan misses the free throw, gets the offensive rebound, they toss it to Pippen. He's on the block trying to post up, and for whatever reason, Russell goes away from Jordan at the 3-point line to double Scotty, and Scotty, just as he did forever, just was as smart as could be, kicks it to Jordan, and Jordan, who's just absolutely dead with the flu, hits the 3, and that's why number 9. The Jordan flu game, game 5 of the NBA Finals, and Jordan hits that late 3 to put the Bulls ahead for good and send the series back to Chicago 3-2, where the Bulls would then win. The one that made the list as an honorable mention, Steve Kerr hitting the shot in Game 6. So, Ben, you didn't necessarily think it was a bad choice for the list, but it was not on yours, correct?
Right. Again, I think this actually kind of goes along with the Kerry Wood thing. That's why when I originally told you, I was like, this isn't a play, this is a moment. It kind of went along with the Kerry Wood thing, where it was not necessarily the I mean, you had that great moment being the flu game. You had the great moment, that 20 strikeout game, but that specific play obviously was a very important play. Again, it wasn't. I say this because it's not like it wasn't anything historic. Like Kerry Wood was a strikeout record. Steve Kerr was winning the actual NBA Finals. I mean, this was if I'm not mistaken, it was like 25, 26 seconds left in the game when he hit it. So the Jazz still were getting the ball. It wasn't the deciding game. Although you could argue, then the Jazz would have had a 3-2 lead instead of, vice versa. So, again, not taking away that it wasn't a big play. It was obviously that's more of a memorable game. I can't sit here and tell you that in the back of my head I can picture this 3-pointer. I had to watch it to remember it. But I obviously remember the flu game, and I remember how that all worked out. But that was my only thing with it, is I don't necessarily remember the 3. I remember the game itself. That's where I was at with it. So,
Matt, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm with Ben too. Just like the Kerry Wood thing, I didn't add it because of the moment. Was not, again, I was dealing with singulars, not to diminish anything about that game or anything about that 3-pointer that he hit. I mean, it's one of the more iconic Michael Jordan moments, and him, Scotty's got his arm around him, that whole thing. But it was a great moment, but to me, not the greatest play. So,
well,
yeah, I would just argue that to me the Pippen carrying Jordan off the court was more memorable than the shot itself.
Okay, and Michael may have just been hungover and not had the flu. So, just saying.
There is that possibility. And I will say, just to kind of go with the moment, when you start to look at everything that happens there in that last 40 seconds, the Jordan offensive rebound off the missed free throw, the 3-pointer by Jordan, the timeout, and then the Jazz come down, and they actually make it a 1-point game. And then I think just speaking to how good the Bulls were and just at times how everybody else was just playing catch-up, the Bulls inbound the ball, and Karl Malone just stands there and doesn't foul Pippen after the inbound. And the Bulls shave 8 seconds off the clock to rebuild the lead to 3, and it's just like just no sense of anything for the Jazz. And I felt like over the 2 years, you had all kinds of moments like that. And there's another one on this list that we'll get into in a little bit. So number 9 on the list. Number 8, our first Blackhawks entry. The
first of many.
Yeah.
The first of 4, is it?
I believe 4, yeah.
4. First of 4 on the list. And you can't really deny that because those 4 moments were unreal. But the first one, the Hossa overtime winner versus Nashville in 2010, Game 5, setting the stage here for this one. Hossa takes a major penalty with about 2 to 3 minutes left in regulation. The Hawks had blown a 3-1 lead at this point. It's 4-3 Nashville. It's looking bleak, and then Kane saves it. Matt, let's go to you. Matt, what do you remember here?
Well, for me, that play and really that whole moment, that was, for me, I know you guys were much bigger hockey fans, much bigger Blackhawks fans at the time than I was, but that's one of the first games that really got me like into it and into that season, or not really into that season, but into that team a little bit more. But just that moment of Hossa getting called for the penalty, going in for the 5-minute.
Should have been kicked out of the game.
Yeah, got the 5 minutes in the box. You know, the Hawks somehow tie it up. They somehow send it to overtime, and he still had, 2 minutes-ish in the box?
Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. And then him just getting out of the box, strolling over next to the net, all of a sudden just in the most perfect spot to score that goal. And it was great because that was his first Blackhawks playoff goal.
Yep.
The United Center was just going nuts. That moment right there is when I thought that team had a chance to really, really do some damage when they could withstand everything that happened in those final, how many ever minutes to go on to that.
Yeah. Awesome play. Ben, anything to add on that?
The only thing I remember with it was when Hossa took that penalty, I was so angry. I had been being nagged by my then, I'm not sure if she was my fiance or just my girlfriend at the time, to take the garbage out all day. Well, when he took that penalty is when I decided to take the garbage out, to then come back upstairs and see that the game was... I basically walked in as they were celebrating the Kane goal, so totally missed that. But yeah, I mean, again, we talked about it sort of in the Jordan flu game where, not necessarily the most... I mean, you could argue that was just an incredibly important game. Again, that same situation, it was the Hawks were on the verge of going down 3-2.
Mm-hmm. And this one was they would go back to Nashville, which is...
even worse. You're on the road in an elimination game. So just a huge moment. I mean, again, something I'll remember that goal for forever. And, it was kind of this is why you sign those kind of players, the Marian Hossas,
sure.
because those exact moments. So...
you were living in the apartment because you said you had to go down the stairs, right?
Yeah, I was in Oak Park.
You were definitely not engaged at that point because we celebrated your engagement.
I was slamming the garbage in the dumpster, just super angry.
Yeah.
I probably remember cursing Marian Hoss's name, saying we probably should have never signed him, what a waste of money, because he cost the Blackhawks, and then, typical me kind of stuff.
Yeah, and you go back to that point, and then the Hawks, they rolled it the rest of the way in that postseason. They went up. They win that game, and they win 4-2 at Nashville. The next in Game 6, then they go into the series with Vancouver. They win that in 6 games and they were up 3-1 in that series. Then they then sweep the Sharks. Right? Yeah, they sweep the Sharks, and then in the finals, they were tied at 2 with the Flyers, but I remember watching Game 5 going, they're not losing Game 5 at home.
Yeah, they lost 2 on the road. They won 2 at home, lost 2 on the road.
One of those in overtime.
Yeah, so
and one of those where it was their worst game of the postseason, and they were down 2. And we watched that one for your birthday up at Dirty Nelly's. and that got me to makes me think of one of my pet peeves, which is TVs in bars that are not synced up. Do you remember, Ben? Do you remember that
I do.
me, you, and your brother, like we walked over to the bar and there was this one like 13-inch TV.
That was ahead of every other TV in the place. Yeah.
They had all these flat screens, and that was the TV that was on, and that is my biggest pet peeve in bars. So I'm glad Marion Hossa can make me remember that moment. All right, number 7. This is a big one, and it's big because I know there's some people that reside as fans on the wrong side of town, as White Sox fans. But it's number 7, and it is the Dwayne Wise catch to save the Burley perfect game. I remember watching this on MLB, did the right thing, and they allowed you to watch the final 3 outs on the internet.
Do they still do that? Do they still like switch games over to like ESPN when it's in that moment? I can't remember if they do that now.
They do, because I remember watching.
I remember seeing like
somebody on the Mariners.
Yeah.
Iwakuma had one last year, and I remember watching it on ESPN.
Yeah, so I remember watching that one on my laptop at work, because it might have even been you, Ben, that texted me like, "Oh, Burley's got a perfect game." So I was like, "Oh, well, I guess I'm gonna have to take a look at this." And it was like a half hour before the end of the day. I was like, "All right, well, let's take a look here." So, unbelievable catch.
Yeah,
moment. The juggle, too. I forgot the juggle until I watched it today, because I remember him going up and grabbing it, but then he bobbles it as he's coming down, and that would have just been, if he would have dropped that ball out of the bobble, that would have just been awful.
Just brutal.
He may not have played another game for the White Sox.
Surprisingly, he still did.
With that one, I mean, it wasn't. I mean, obviously, if it was the fact, it saved everything. It saved the shutout. It saved the no-hitter. It saved the perfect game. I mean, it didn't necessarily save the game. If I'm not mistaken, it was 4-0 at the time.
Yeah,
so Burley was probably still getting the win, but I mean, just an incredible effort. It's just one of those plays where you don't know that play's made if it's a 4-1 ball game and there's really nothing else on the line. I mean, he just got on his horse. He took off. It was one of those plays he didn't care about anything except making the catch. And again, like you said, I remember the bobble. I remember the catch. I mean, going a couple feet over the wall to grab that. 9th inning. It's not this wasn't like middle of the game type thing. This was the 9th inning. I believe there was 1 out in the 9th, so you had 2 more outs left after that. So just again, an unbelievable play. I had it pretty high on my list. I don't remember exactly where, but pretty high. But yeah, I mean, again, just a play I'll definitely always remember.
Oh, for me, this was actually number 1 on my list. And typically, I've said this before, when I do my list, I don't look things up. I just start writing stuff down. And it was the very first thing I wrote down, which was surprising for me, being a Cubs fan and stuff. But I remember that moment. I remember that game. He came in to the top of the 9th too, as a defensive replacement, I believe. Uh-huh. So, which makes that kind of even cooler, that he hadn't really played the whole game and everything. And it's one of those iconic moments that I agree with Ben's point that would that catch have been made had it been 4-1, had it been any other moment other than trying to save a perfect game.
Don't even worry about it not being in the perfect game. If it's not the 9th inning, I think is even more important to this, right? If it's the 4th inning and this is the 10th batter of the game,
right?
Nobody cares.
And it's one of those things too that doesn't always seem like you have those weird plays like that something crazy happens when guys are tossing no hitters or even a perfect game or something. You have something that's just so out of the ordinary. You have these amazing plays, these catches and stops and all this stuff that's pretty remarkable. So that play just immediately popped out in my head, was my number 1 right from the get-go, and I was actually surprised it wasn't higher on your guys' list, but it is what it is.
So I'm going to end this conversation with one question. Mark Burley, Hall of Famer, yes or no?
No.
Matt?
No.
I looked at it, and
Hall of very, very good.
It's so rare to have a guy throw a perfect game and a no-hitter in his career. And if you go back and look at who's done it, I mean, it's a who's who of awesome, except for the one guy in the Sox that threw one a couple of years ago. and
Oh,
then got sent to the minors later in the year.
Philip Humber.
Philip Umber, yeah.
Yeah, but
Oh God.
but it just, yeah, I agree. Hall very, very good. And you look at his number one comp through age 36 season, Andy Pettit, which is not bad.
Not too shabby.
Not too shabby. All right. Rounding out the bottom 5 of our top 10 here, another White Sox moment. One that I did not watch live. I was real bitter about the Sox being in the World Series. I'll be honest with you. I was super bitter. But it is an unbelievable moment. Scotty Pods with the Game 2 walk-off home run to win Game 2, and essentially at that point, I mean, the way that team was pitching, that was it. That was the end of the World Series there, because it wasn't going to change. The Sox. You want to talk about a team of destiny? That was it. Matt, what do you remember about that home run?
First thing I remember about that home run was the fact that Scott Podsednik never hit home runs, which sort of made that kind of memorable. For me, I had this weird love of Scott Podsednik. I hate to.
Of course you did.
Yeah, I know. It's the white, scrappy, kid, I guess. I loved him when he was in Milwaukee for some reason.
Wasn't he 34 during all this too? Like, it's not. He wasn't a kid then.
He was 29 when he went during that World Series run.
Was he? Okay.
But he didn't really get a full-time starting gig until he was 27 in Milwaukee. So
yeah.
Okay.
And I weirdly loved him in Milwaukee. I don't know why. It was just there was this period of time where I was going to a bunch of games in Milwaukee, and I don't know. I really liked the guy, but that was another moment that stuck out. I think, although I'm trying to think. Let me look. Oh, I had this as my number 9. I don't think I watched this one live though. But I do remember I was just shocked when I found out that Scott Podsednik, of all people, hit a game-winning home run.
Ben, anything to add here?
Yeah, I watched it live, and I just, to this day, I don't understand how he did it. Again, like you said, this is a guy that never really hit home runs. I want to say he had like 40 career home runs, something like that. I believe this was his only postseason home run.
He actually, I looked it up because I was really curious. He had one during the ALDS against the Red Sox.
Maybe that would have been why it was
even only 2 home runs of the season. He didn't hit a single home run in the 162-game season. He hits 2 in the postseason.
I mean, and then wasn't the home run off of Brad Lidge too?
The winner? Yes, I want to say you're right. I think it was off Brad Lidge.
So again, you're talking at that time. It was Brad Lidge. So at that time, that was one of the game's most dominant closers. And you have a guy who, like you said, didn't hit any home runs the entire season, comes up and nails one. Just an unbelievable moment. And again, another one of those plays that, I mean, when I watched it, my jaw dropped, and I'm like, they're going to win this whole damn thing, aren't they?
Well, just to reset the stage on that whole home run and how it came to be, the Astros, in the middle of the 7th inning, had an 80% win probability. Konerko hits the grand slam to make it 6-4. Jenks blows a save in the bottom of the 9th, and then Podsednik launches that home run to win the game there. And the rest is history at that point, because man.
I mean, if there was a guy that you weren't expecting that to happen, it was him. I mean, when you're Brad Lidge, you're like, okay, worst case scenario, guy gets on first.
And then you got to worry about him maybe stealing some bases or something.
Right. It was just an all-time moment, really.
So he goes down on the list, though. The 3 home runs this goes on the list for me of home runs by guys you don't expect, with Ozzie Smith, who hit that one to right field, and you have the elder Buck go crazy. Like, that was great. Love that call. That is that call, I believe, right?
Yes, I believe it is.
And then the other one was the other one that it makes me think of is the Bucky fucking Dent 78. I believe it was
dropping the second F-bomb. All right, here we go. I'm going to keep a Scott tally on F-bombs.
And I'll put a quarter in the jar every time. But that's how they refer to it, though, in Boston, because it is. I mean, that again, a guy who doesn't hit home runs, and essentially like a 1-game playoff, or it was a late season game that just capped off another Red Sox collapse. So Podsednik goes right into that category for me as well. So, all right, 6 through 10. 10 was Kerry Wood's final pitch in the 20 strikeout game. Jordan, the big 3 in Game 5 during the flu game. 8, Hossa with the overtime winner against Nashville in 2010. The Dwayne Wise catch to save the perfect game. And Scott Podsednik, World Series, Game 2 walk-off. That's number 6. A solid bottom half of the list. But in all reality, none of them as good as the top 5 here, because and we're going to go Blackhawks crazy here because there are some great moments here on this list for the Blackhawks, and we're going to hit all those. But before we do, number 5, one that is just it may be the most bittersweet moment on this list, without a doubt.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Yeah, and it's one that we've talked about. I think this is going to end up being the 3rd time we've talked about it on this show in 6 episodes. So after today, we're done until we get into Bears draft pick history, which we'll do somewhere in May, and we talk about this guy again. But Devin Hester with the Super Bowl kickoff return.
He was ridiculous. It's still, yeah. You're welcome. That was my best, Jeff Jodiak. I was so enthused to say that.
That was terrible.
It's, but anyways, this one, it was tough to decide whether or not to put it on, but at the same time, it goes down as probably my most memorable Bears moment. With Hester returning the opening kickoff in Super Bowl 41, sort of just. It set that tone for that game. I mean, I honestly did not think they could lose that game after that moment. It was pure Hester in every sense of it. He made a whole lot of nothing. He ran through 4 or 5 people who had no idea he was even coming through. I mean, it was just it was just so Hester. I mean, that's probably the best way to put it. Scott, what about you? I mean, how high did you have this on your list, or did you?
I didn't.
Not at all.
Yeah, it's one of those where when I was making my list, I took the context of the moment and included that, and this play, although awesome, and I'll never forget jumping up and down in my living room, in my parents' living room with my dad, because it's the same boat, Matt. I mean, how are they going to lose this game, right? 13 seconds in the Super Bowl, it's 7-0 Bears, and you're going, how is this going to happen? And it just, for me, though, I mean, ultimately, it becomes a footnote in history because they lost the game. So it was just, I had other moments that I thought to put on the list ahead of that one. So
was that also the same year? I think it was that Ted Ginn Jr. returned the opening kickoff in the national championship game against Florida, and they got spanked along the way, and it was one of those things, because I think it was the opening. Ted Ginn Jr. returned the opening kickoff 93 yards for a touchdown. I remember in the midst of all of us celebrating with my friends that somebody said, "Yeah, but remember, Ted Ginn Jr. did that in the national championship game," and it was like, son of a bitch, and then it happened. So, Ben, where did you have this on your list?
I think we both had it at 5, to be truthful, somewhere around there. Like we had it at the same number.
Yeah, I have mine at 5.
I don't want to talk about it a lot because we've talked about it so much, but
True.
Again, it was just one of those moments where I said to you guys earlier, yes, they didn't win, but it was still just a great moment. I don't think any of those other moments were better than that one, even though obviously the Bears lost the Super Bowl. So.
Fair enough. Let's leave it there, and let's go into number 4, which I think we're going to have a lot to talk about with number 4. 4, 3, and 1, we're going to have a lot to talk about because these are all just such huge moments in the history of Chicago sports. And it is recent history that we're going to talk about here. But, it's not as though in the last 25 years, Jordan was awesome. But Jordan on the championship stage was just, he was excellent. There weren't.
It was rare that you had to worry.
Yeah,
for the
most
most part.
hard it's so hard sometimes to classify some moments as great when you have no fear. I mean, I remember being a kid going, "Yeah, of course the Bulls are going to win the NBA title because."
Yeah, I mean, I said this in one of our prior ones where I don't remember what our topic was. Um, honestly, I don't remember, but we were talking about the Bulls, and it was one of those things I said I don't consider some of these moments like great moments because I expected them to win. Like
Yeah,
they had to win. Like it was Jordan. Jordan didn't lose when Jordan played. It was just that simple. Like that's what we grew up with. So
yeah. And the more I sit here and look at this list, the more I'm going, man, we don't have the Jordan shoulder shrug on here from the 92 finals. We don't have the Paxson 3 from 93 against the Suns on this list. We don't
Which
have the Jordan game 1 against the Jazz, which that one I love when he hits the shot over Russell in that series to start it off. And
let's get back to the list.
we will, but I'm just saying, like, those are all great moments that didn't end up on this list, and I think they really don't end up on this list because they were expected moments. And that's why hockey, we have 3 of the top 4 are Hawks, because hockey is chaos, and hockey is
Well, yeah, hockey lends itself more to moments like this because, like Scott said, there is chaos. There is so much uncertainty, and things can, a puck can knock off of a guy, and we talked about that with the most disappointing games a couple weeks ago with the Game 7 against LA a couple years ago. So it is that is part of the reason why they are in the top 4. And I don't know if Scott even said what this one was.
But this is the segue into it though. When we talk about that randomness and the things that make it great, number 4 really is the essential hockey moment. And that's Brent Seabrook, the overtime winner in Game 7 against the Red Wings. And there's just so many layers to that play. And you can't talk about that play and not talk about the moment that could be there in its place, which is the Hjalmarsson goal with 2 minutes left that gets waved off because Saad gets hit with a penalty. There's a penalty on each side. And I'm still sitting here. I watched that thing 5 times today. And I still don't know what Saad got a penalty for. I really don't. So, Ben, let's go to you here. I mean, that moment meant everything to that. I mean, you have the comeback, and Ben, take it, please.
Somebody was getting a little excited.
No, I mean, I think that's exactly it. I mean, the moment itself, I mean, you had, again, I remember the Hjalmarsson, the phantom penalty that, took his goal away. You had the comeback. Was it 3-0 or was it 3-1?
3-1. The Hawks dominated Game 1.
Yeah, and so they lost 3 in a row. Coming back in Detroit, just again, it was a defining moment, and at that point it was one of those moments where you go, obviously you after that game you go, how does this team not win? After what they just went through with that Red Wing series. I mean, This is an all-time battle. It's like, it just felt like if you don't win that game, that Seabrook overtime winner, like you said, it's in the back of your head. Like, it doesn't make a difference anymore, just because you didn't finish the job at the end of the day. And we talk for an all-time series. That was the second round. I mean, that was, like, this wasn't some world-renowned Stanley Cup final or conference championship. This was a second round series that ended up being, an all-timer.
And I think you can't talk about that play without talking about how this was the older brother that had just beat the crap out of the younger brother for 20 years, and here it is, and the Hawks want to consider themselves the elite, and the only way you can be elite is if you knock that team off. And it would have felt like, for all the steps forward the Hawks have taken, winning the Cup in 2010, to then not be able to beat the Red Wings. A team that was so injured that year, it would have really felt like you took, for the 5 steps forward, you took 10 steps back because the Red Wings still owned your ass.
Yeah, and to sort of wrap this up real quick, I had this as my number two. The Dwayne Wise catch was number one, but this was number two. But it is arguably, in my mind, my favorite Chicago sports moment of the last 10 or so years, just because of and I know that sort of doesn't make sense considering the other things that are on this list, but Seabrook played so terribly that whole playoffs up to that point he was not very good, and so it was sort of a redeeming moment for him, and like Scott said, to knock off your big brother after dropping three straight, and prior to that and everything. So an amazing moment, an incredible moment. The UC was popping that night. It was crazy. But we've got a couple, two more Hawks moments here on the list.
And let's go right to three, which is the Kane overtime winner in 2010 to win the Stanley Cup. So this is our first championship shot, I believe, right? We don't have, none of the others were to actually win the championship, right? So here you have Kane, the overtime winner. That's our number three. And Ben, do you want to talk about the night at Buffalo Wild Wings?
Yeah, I mean, me and Scott were together for this one, watching at Buffalo Wild Wings in Elmhurst. When this thing ended up going to overtime, just a disappointment. It was years of those really cruddy Hawks teams just flashing back in our memory.
I went outside and pouted on the curb during the entire intermission.
There were tears.
I did not cry.
You cried.
I don't buy it.
Until they won. No,
we all know that you're a crier anyway.
Yeah. I am a crier, but I did not cry there. I pouted hard, though.
There were tears in your eyes.
There was a lot of woe is me going out on that curb.
But, again, we were there. Obviously, I think we all, if you're listening to this, odds are you're probably a sports fan, so you kind of remember this one. This was Kane shot it, brought it in, shot it off, off left at just an impossible angle. Squeaks through Leighton's 5-hole, and there's all that question of what happened. Like, everybody was kind of like, where did the puck go? And Kane starts celebrating, and I really think me and Scott were the only two people in that bar that knew that puck went in. And we were jumping and screaming, and people are looking at us like we're crazy.
Katie thought we were nuts. My wife Katie was there, and she just thought we were absolutely.
They're just like me and Scott are just hugging and jumping and screaming, and people don't know what's going on. But then you saw Kane start skating down the ice, and people started joining in, and then all of a sudden it started roaring, and it was a very anticlimactic Stanley Cup championship win. But you know what? All the same, it was a great moment.
Yeah, my memory, my recollection of that moment was I wasn't pouty like Scott, watching it with a few friends that only one other friend that was there at the time was a big hockey fan, big Hawks fan, and I remember we were sitting there, and when Kaner came around there and shot it, I stood up, and my other buddy stood up, and we both looked at each other, and then Kane goes, skating down, throwing off all of his equipment, his gloves, sticks are in the air and everything. We both looked at each other. We start screaming and jumping up and down while our other friends are saying, I don't think he scored. And it was very anticlimactic when everybody's down on one end, looking all the way down at the other end to see what the ref's going to call. But the fact that it was the first Stanley Cup championship in, 50 years for the Hawks, so that obviously a huge moment, and one that really solidified my stance on being a Hawks fan, which, whatever, call me bandwagon, I could accept that.
Bandwagon is ready to accept people, though. I'll never understand the people that don't want people to cheer for their team. Another one of those pet peeves.
Completely agree.
We'll have to have a pet peeve show, because the TV's in the bar, and people that are like, oh, get off the bandwagon. No, come on. It's more fun. The more people we have on, the better the time. One final point on that Kane overtime winner. Part of the play that I think gets overlooked a lot is the keep in by Campbell.
Yeah. The
Flyers are looking to get that thing out of the zone, and Brian Campbell grabs that puck, corrals it at the blue line, keeps it in, and gets it to Kane. And it's overlooked because everyone's like, oh, Kane scored the goal. And it's like, but Kane doesn't even get the chance to score that goal if Campbell doesn't corral that puck. And then the other thing, I watched the overtime again today. I forget every time that I watch the replay. The Flyers almost score 20 seconds into that overtime.
Yeah.
There's that puck, and it just bounces across the crease, like 5 feet in front of the crease, and Niemi, gets a save, and it's, I mean, he lets in the goal to Hartnell with 4 minutes left, but he had some massive saves there. He had one off the helmet with like 2.5 left, then he has that one 20 seconds in the overtime, and then Campbell with the keep, and you have all these events that have to happen in order for Kane to make the play. So, really awesome. All right, number 2. The only reason this isn't number 1 is because number 1 was so unbelievable that you can't have it as less than 1. But number 2, the end of a career, because we're not going to talk about his time in Washington. We're not. It didn't.
He never played in Washington. What are you talking about?
Yeah. Well, what happened now?
It's funny. I was watching Friends today, and they made a reference to Jordan on the Wizards, and I was like, ew.
It honestly never crosses my mind. I really never ever think about it.
That you were watching Friends tonight, so let's move on. Said that.
That's a great show, and you know it.
Topic for another day.
So the number 2 on the list, the Jordan final shot, 1998, Game 6 against the Jazz. Let me set the stage for you. Stockton hits a 3 to take the Jazz up 86-83.
Real quick on Stockton, because I watched this moment the other day. Stockton could not look any less like an athlete. But anyways. Right? Right? They should have called him. They should have called him the mailman. They should have called him the mailman because he looks like the guy who should deliver your mail. Anyways.
Okay. I can't argue with that. It's not a bad point.
Sorry, I've been petting this up for a while.
Matt's pet peeve is John Stockton is not the mailman. So Stockton hits the 3 to give the Jazz the 86-83 lead, and then Jordan just takes the game over in the final 40 seconds. Out of the timeout, Jordan gets the inbound, goes straight to the hoop, gets 2 quick, and then Bulls are down 1, and they try to get the ball down to Malone in the post, and he's backing Rodman down, and Jordan just comes around the side, slaps the ball out of Malone's hand, and there's no doubt as in the moment you know it, you watch the replays, you know it. Jordan's not giving that ball up.
No, never.
No, that guy is going, this is my moment, and he goes down, and I don't care. Michael Jordan, Byron Russell will say for the rest of his life that Jordan pushed off. And guess what? That is the greatest player of all time.
That's never getting.
He could have punched you in the face. They weren't going to call a foul on Jordan there. It just wasn't going to happen.
He didn't push him. He slipped.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I remember this moment. I remember watching it, and then I remember because I was 13 years old that as soon as the game ended and I was running around like a 13-year-old screaming and yelling, that I then decided I had to go out to my driveway and take that shot like 700 times, even though it was 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah, you had to.
And he missed 697 of them.
I did, but the 3 I made looked great. They were so good. So good. Ben.
I could just hear Scott going, and Sternal backs him down, game winner.
It's another topic for another day. Maybe we'll cover it in our March Madness episode. But we had some good times reenacting March Madness on Scott's driveway. But again, topic for another day. But going back to the Jordan shot, again, this was mine. I actually had this number 1. It's just the most memorable play to me. I mean, again, just you think Jordan, this is of all Jordan's great moments. I mean, this to me, it's number 1. It's the one I'm going to remember. When you put it into context, it won a championship. It was his last championship in Chicago. I think everybody kind of felt that was probably it for him.
I don't remember think kind of about it, but I think
you remember the years before when he was doing the countdown with his fingers. He was doing 5, then 6, then 7, then 8, and going all the way up. Well, this one was just hands in the air, celebrating. It was just kind of one of those things you go, this is it. This is the last time we're going to see this guy in a Bulls uniform, and that's just adds to what it was. I mean, just, again, to me, it was the greatest shot I've ever seen him take and make, obviously. So,
Matt, you got a thought here?
Just one of the most iconic sports moments, plays ever. I mean, how many people have a poster or a picture framed in their house, in their basement, in their bedroom, office, whatever it is, bars, of that shot? I mean, it was pure Jordan. It was the wrist hanging after he shot it. It was that swagger that MJ had that was just so awesome, especially for a 12-year-old kid like me. Like, you wanted that MJ swagger that he was taking the ball. He was going to score. And there was no ifs, ands, or buts about it. There was no doubt. Not a person in that whole arena thought anybody but him was going to take it, and nobody thought that he was going to miss it.
Yeah, and
there was no way there's a Jazz fan sitting there thinking, I think MJ's going to,
he's going to choke. There's no way he makes this.
Yeah, I mean, it's pure MJ in every sense of the word. It's a moment that makes me smile anytime, like when I rewatched it the other day, just the memories of that team and what like Jordan meant to me at that age and how important he shaped like my sports life.
And for all the confidence we had in that, there shouldn't have been. That Jazz team, I mean, that Jazz team should have won that series. They should have finished that thing off. And Pippen's back is bad. Jordan's playing major minutes with Judd Bushler and Steve Kerr. And all due respect to those guys, I mean, it was not Jordan's best team. But that's what makes it awesome. That's what makes Jordan's shot awesome. But now we're on to number one. And number one is number one, I think, ultimately because it's so unbelievable that it actually happened. We talk about the 2010 Stanley Cup, and the moment is I don't want to say tarnished, because how could you ever have a moment that's tarnished when a team wins the Cup? But there's not that iconic call of the Hawks winning the Stanley Cup. And everybody's confused, and then, oh yeah, the Hawks won, and the celebration happens, and you're excited. But this was almost like payback. Because holy smokes, those 17 seconds. Matthew, describe the 17 seconds.
Oh, it was one of those moments that I was 100% sure it was coming back to Chicago. Just the way the Hawks had really struggled most of that game too. They were not playing very well, and Boston had that momentum, which I don't like using that word, but whatever. But that first goal, and still to this day, I don't understand why Michael Handzus was your extra skater at that point, but whatever, it worked out to their advantage, and Brian Bickle did Brian Bickle things when he was amazing. He scores that first goal. I was stunned. Could not believe that they were going to take that game to overtime. I was happy with the fact that they're bringing that game to overtime. I'm standing up. I'm jumping up and down, hugging my buddy. And seemingly in that whole, I'm still standing up. We're still embracing each other. And then Bolin scores. And it was like, we looked at each other like, you've got to be kidding. What? And then it was just this moment of like pure joy. It was unbelievable that they scored there. It was crazy. There's few things in sports, I think, that compare to that moment, and I know hockey rarely gets like a broad spectrum in terms of what people view it as. Football is always going to get it, baseball is going to get it, basketball is going to get it, but hockey rarely does. But I think that moment is so iconic in just the whole realm of sports. For something like that, in 17 seconds to win a Stanley Cup like that, unbelievable.
Ben?
Yeah, I remember watching the game. We had just moved in to our house, and it was basically like an empty house. We had like a TV in our bedroom and a TV in the other room upstairs, and Alex was playing video games in the other room, and I was watching the game, and Alex came running in because I was screaming like a 12-year-old girl. It was like the most highest pitched scream ever when Bolin scored. I wish I could reenact it, but I just remember like going like, they did it again. Like I said, they did it again. Like they scored again, and she's like, what? And I'm like, they're gonna win. Like I don't know how they did it. Like, I mean, you were a minute away from being tied at 3, like hoping to God you were gonna beat this team, to winning it. It was just an unbelievable moment, and the guy that probably got ripped off the most was Johnny Oduya, who he clanked that off the post, didn't he?
He did.
Yeah, Oduya.
Oduya hits it off the post, and Bolin was behind.
Oduya, it goes off Frolik's stick though in that process. Is it
I don't
Oduya
think
shoots
so.
it and
I think
then it hits Frolik's stick, goes off the post, and then Bolin puts it. I swear, Frolik.
I just remember it hitting the post. So whoever hit the post is the guy that's like, oh well, dang it, I was like a half an inch from being the hero. And then Bolin celebrating like the game was actually over. He throws his gloves
That was great.
down, like he just didn't know what was going on. But yeah, I mean, again, just an all-time moment. I had this as my number 2, but just God, it was one of those moments that I'll remember forever.
So I remember when I watched this one. I watched this with my dad and Katie and my sister, and they scored, and we're all cheering, and then they scored again, and like my dad and Katie were just talking about like, oh, I can't believe this is going to overtime, and I'm screaming again, and Katie's like, Scott, that's just a replay. I'm like, no, it's not a replay.
That's what it felt like.
Yeah.
Well, and the crazy thing too was the fact that you got that out of that line, because that was your third line right at the time, and the fact that Q was like, you know, he was going with defense, bringing in Frolik, Bolin. Who else was on that line? You guys remember?
Kruger. I'm watching it right now. It's Kruger, Bolin, Frolik, Oduya, and then I don't.
Yeah, I think Frolik did get a piece of it.
Frolik totally gets a piece of it to go off the post, and I will always remember that series specifically because everybody was just all over Tuukka Rask being unbelievable, and Crawford, and you can't go glove side, and you go back and look at that series. Crawford outlasted Tuukka Rask in the triple overtime in Game 1. Rask wins Game 2 in that overtime game. Game 3 was Crawford's worst game, but then Rask gives an uninspired performance in Game 5, and then Game 4 is that crazy game in Boston where Seabrook gets the overtime winner, and everyone was on on Crawford after that game, and it's like you all realize on the other end of the ice, Tuukka Rask gave up 6 goals, right? Like for everything for everyone being all over Crawford for being bad and not like being the best goalie, Tuukka Rask, everyone's like, oh, Rask is fine. It's like, dude, he just gave up an extra goal. He gave up some pretty big goals in that series, and I just remember feeling good for Crawford at the end of that series because the Hawks picked him up, and I'll be honest, and to tie it into today, it feels like if the Hawks are going to get a 4th cup in 8 years this year, it's going to be Crawford, carrying this team to the cup because he's been unbelievable this year. So, but there's your list. A good one. Let's go 10-1. Kerry Wood, final pitch in the 20 strikeout game. Number 9, the Jordan flu game. Jordan hits the late 3 to win Game 5. Hossa, the overtime winner versus Nashville in 2010 at 8. Number 7, Dwayne Wise's catch to save Burley's perfect game. 6, Scott Podsednik, the World Series Game 2 walk-off. 5, Devin Hester's Super Bowl return. 4, Seabrook's overtime winner against the hated Red Wings in 2013. 3, Kane's overtime winner to give the Hawks their first cup since 61. Is that right? 61? Don't know why I decided to do that right there without being certain. But I did it. Kane with that overtime winner to win the cup in 2010. Jordan's final shot in 98. And then 17 seconds, the goal by Bolin to seal their second cup in 4 years. Holy smokes. What a list. I feel good. I don't feel dirty like I did 3 weeks ago after we finished our bad sports moments. This one just felt good. And I don't know about you guys, but my list was like 25, 30 long. And I had to parse it down, and it was difficult, but I loved every second of it.
Yeah, I think I ended up getting to about 15 or 16, and it was nice to actually reflect on happy moments because it was a little depressing there a few weeks ago. But this list was fun. I like doing these, but I also think that I also like the fact that we had a lot of differing opinions in terms of where we wanted to rank things, which I think is good because we did have so many similar last week with the quarterbacks, particularly Ben and I. So I like the fact that this one was a little more jumbled around and kind of had a chance to say our piece at a few crucial moments.
Yeah.
Or plays, I guess, not moments. We have to specify that. On a, I'm going to take over some of the Scott duties here. In terms of, we've been trying to put a lot more content on our WordPress, which is simply just windedcitycountdown.wordpress.com, or I'm sure you could Google it and find it. Ben's been writing a lot of stuff, a little more than me, and. But anyways, Ben and I have started this thing that we're running this week and into next week, where we're looking over each individual position group on the Bears in terms of the off-season evaluation, looking at the rosters, looking at the players, and sort of taking a look at what their options could be in terms of free agency, the draft, who we think they might go after, who we think's a good fit. So Ben actually put up we had a piece on the quarterbacks that came out this week. We'll post the link on the Facebook. Tomorrow we're doing running backs. Wednesday's receivers, I believe. Correct, Ben?
Yeah.
And then we'll do offensive line and then tight ends. And then next week we're going to hit the defensive side too. So Ben and I are alternating back and forth just to sort of give you guys a better idea. We're trying to put out a bunch of stuff that over on the WordPress site.
And while the two of you are busy writing away, I am trying to expand our reach with Facebook. I've worked on getting us on some different websites with our podcast. We are on Stitcher now, which is good. And I spend a lot of my free time for the show looking up different avenues for us to promote the show. We actually tossed a couple bucks into Facebook ads this week, and our reach was really, really, really good for $5 for a day. We reached a bunch of people. I don't know if that resulted in any downloads. That remains to be seen, but it's something that I'm really interested to see if we can continue to grow the show. So we've got that going on. Ben, I thought some of your pieces, coming out of retirement, your first time writing articles since 2003 for the Lancer.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's been a bit, but you're doing a great job, I think, and I think our readers are doing the same. So we're just going to keep on growing the old pod here. So some good stuff on the website this week. Be sure to check that out. And then before we go, I'm going to tease next week. And it's not really going to be a tease. I'm going to just be straight up. We're doing our very first off sports topic here. And it is
non-sports. That's probably better.
Yeah, non-sports is a better way.
Not off sports.
It's okay.
But they do what you meant.
Yeah, sure. Let's hope so. We'll find out later this week if they knew what I meant. But we're going to do a list of, in honor of the Oscars, which is on the 28th, I believe. So next Monday, in advance of the Oscars, we're going to have our top 10 movies that Shawshank us. Ben, would you like to explain what Shawshanking is?
Essentially, it's kind of something that's floated around on social media. Specifically, I believe it was the 670 guys that do it a lot. But Shawshanking is a movie where we all have those moments where we're just scrolling through and we end up hitting. In general, it's usually focused on those. The AMCs, the ABC families, TNT. It's just a movie you're flipping through that when that movie's on, you're watching that movie no matter what, commercials and all. It doesn't make a difference.
Even if you own the DVD, because
you own the DVD, you've seen it 10,000 times. It's just that movie when it's on, you're watching it. It doesn't matter. Even if it's the edited version, whatever the case may be. But
Shawshank is always the edited version. It is not good.
And I think we're going to exclude Shawshank from the actual list because that's why it's called Shawshank, because it's automatically number one.
Shawshank is the default number one. It's just like we're going to do a list.
So we're going to do number 2 through 11.
Yes. It's like when we're going to do our greatest wide receivers of all time at one point. We're going to exclude Jerry Rice because it's Jerry Rice. We know he's
number one.
We get it, right? It's basketball players. It's Jordan. We know he's number one. So same thing here. Shawshank is, and for all intents and purposes, will always be the number one. So we're going to do that, and then we're going to give you a little Oscar preview. I know for me, I'm most interested with the Oscars, Chris Rock, if he's going to say anything about the racial controversy. I'm really excited for that. Ben, I know Matt is looking. Are both maybe both of you guys are the same brain? Both looking forward to Leo maybe pulling home that first
Definitely.
Best Actor.
Well,
Love
how do
the-
you not
love the
get?
guy.
He needs to.
Love it. He deserves it. He's been deserving it for a while. He's an amazingly talented actor. I've loved pretty much everything he's put out for the last 10, 15 years. So excited for him. I'm a big movie guy, so I hope he gets it. But like Scott said, we'll touch a lot more on that next week. I'm excited to do something non-sports, just to sort of get outside of the box or off sport.
Expand our horizon.
Oh yes, we're gonna expand off sports here, and with that, that's it. Episode 6 in the book. Again, make sure iTunes subscribe. You can get us through Stitcher, and if we find any other places that you can listen to our podcast, we're gonna make sure that we get that out there for you ASAP and let you know about it through the Facebook so that you can tell your friends and they can listen as well. So, for Ben Russo and Matt Urich, I'm Scott Sterno. Thanks again for listening. Be sure to check out the WordPress this week for the off-season stuff with the Bears that Ben and Matt are writing, and be sure to tell your friends to subscribe on iTunes. Thanks for listening.